It is Mike to Heal Your Gut Guy, and we have a special guest with us today. This is Angela. She was dealing with some really bad Crohn's. You had so many things going on.
My name is Angela. I work a very stressful career. In 2017, I got sick very suddenly. I had a roommate situation. I basically let someone walk all over me and live in my home and stop paying rent. And I continued to let this individual live there because I felt so bad for him. It ended in an explosive near eviction situation with him leaving. I had to call
Yeah.
the police. It was very hideous. And right after that, I got really sick and it
And
came
what
on
kind of
really
symptoms were you
suddenly.
dealing with? So you had a Crohn's and a colitis
Yeah.
diagnosis. Okay.
Yeah.
So when that resolved, what kind of symptoms? I'm guessing you had fevers and headaches and
So it started
diarrhea.
with me throwing up for the first time in 20 years, which was wild. I'm not someone who gets nauseated. So maybe for everyone else, that's just like, all right, that doesn't sound that bad. It was really traumatic for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I had a really high fever that came on just like very suddenly. I felt like I was melting, having some weird psychedelic experience.
It
And
literally, you're from a GNM perspective, it's the brain relay healing, and there's that, like, literally the brain is spasming, which
It was
can
trippy. I felt
have,
like I was
yeah.
melting, like I was in a Salvador Dali painting. I seemed to get a little bit better after that. And then I made contact with that person again briefly.
Ooh,
And then I got very, very sick. So a lot of rectal bleeding, spasming, food seemed to just go right through me.
yeah.
And it progressed and got worse and worse over a period of about 2 years. I ended up in the hospital. I tried some natural things. I tried regular medicine things, which were things that normally I wouldn't touch, but I was very desperate. I was very
Yeah.
desperate and a lot of pain. I had a lot of ulcers in my colon.
Oh,
It started to just every time I would go to a specialist or a doctor, it would get worse and worse and worse. They would offer initially just take the steroid cream, take this suppository. My colon started to just take on a life of its own, right? It was like
yeah.
angry and revolting. And we
Hmm.
could not get it under control for more than about 2 weeks at a time.
And this almost sounds like a very textbook situation of what is crap I want to get rid of,
Yeah.
but I can't. What's the biological purpose of diarrhea? It's to get rid of, literally, it's to get rid of crap.
Yeah.
And
I
there's
was
this
going to
piece
the
of crap in your
bathroom.
life you could not get rid of.
I could not. I was going to the bathroom like 20 times a day. And then at the
Hmm.
end of the whole experience, like I had a lot of like shame and like emotional issues that I was just like
Yeah.
not able or willing to deal with, and a little bit in denial about what an embarrassing, stupid situation that was. And looking
Hmm.
back on it, and if one of my friends had done that, I would have been like, what is wrong with you that you would put up with that? That's your home, get that out. Oh, but I feel so bad.
Hmm.
And I think that my inability to really face my own perceived failures in that situation made it a lot worse and harder for me to physically process as well.
What I like to tell people is the conscious mind can't deal with it because you're busy with work or whatever. Life happens, but that's when these conflict shocks happen. When they tend to, they can happen at any time, but especially when we're just overwhelmed by work, and then this roommate situation happens, and it's the conscious mind's already very limited to begin with, and then the subconscious mind has to step in and be like, all right, you can't consciously deal with this, we're going to have the colon deal with it.
Totally. And I could feel the whole time like my body was just processing this in a different way. I felt like I had trapped emotions in
Yeah.
my colon. And I had other
Yeah.
friends who I have a friend who's very into medical medium
Yeah.
who would tell me that I had a virus. And I just
You
knew,
have Epstein Barr.
I knew in my gut it's wrong. That's
Hmm.
just wrong. That's not the case. This was triggered by an event in my life. And people are like, oh, but it's just too severe for it to be anybody. Everybody just, whether they meant to or not,
Yeah.
just gaslit me on the whole situation. Like, oh, that's not the
Yeah.
way that it works. That's not what's happening.
If this would have happened 50 years ago, it would have been common knowledge that was caused by stress. because
Yeah, it
colitis
was
and
so
Crohn's were psychosomatic diseases back then. So at least you wouldn't be called crazy back then.
It was
Or
so clearly stress, and it
yeah,
advanced. I was in and out of the hospital. The longest hospitalization period I had was 2 weeks, multiple procedures, not
yeah,
literally exploratory surgery. They're doing
wow.
colonoscopy to try to figure out what's going on, finding new things, finding deep ulcerated fissures, things where they're like, oh, we're sorry, we didn't know. We didn't really
So
believe you when you said you were in pain, and now we see it.
yeah, yeah, it's wild. So what are your symptoms looking like now? How are you doing now?
So it's crazy. I went from the doctor saying they were going to take my colon out to now, if I have a really stressful event, like I just did, I just chaired like a national political convention. It
Mm-hmm.
was very contentious. I had a 16-hour board meeting where I was on my feet the entire time behind a podium. I
Wow.
get home, I'm very tired, was exhausted. I started to feel a little bit of spasming and pain in my colon. I
Mm-hmm.
stayed in bed for 2 days. I woke up and I feel almost fine. I feel
Yeah.
now like how a normal person would react to stress. Some of my colleagues who were at the event came down with colds. It was like
Yeah.
a very normal, like a conference thing. I don't deal with conflict that way. My body deals with it in a different way. And as soon as I start
Yeah.
to feel a little unwell, I'm like, you're going to stay in bed where I'm not going to stew on things, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to just let my body process it and try to process it psychologically and emotionally. And
Yeah.
here I am, a functional adult, just a couple of days later. It's a night and day, like it's shocking to me.
And that would have probably been an ER visit. And
Oh,
then you
yeah.
would have had
Oh,
more stress put on your plate because they don't
mhm.
know what's wrong. They're going to give you some big old bill for telling you absolutely nothing. And you're already stressed out about work, and now you're stressed out about your health, and you don't have the energy to address the stressors. Like it's this runaway snowball when you don't understand what your body is doing. So that's so
Oh,
cool.
yeah. I have such like hospital trauma. I don't know if PTSD is the right word, but the thought of going and how violating it feels to
Yeah.
be in there, getting poked and stabbed with things by people who are to some degree unsympathetic and have
Yeah.
zero interest in hearing
Yeah.
what you perceive to be wrong with you. Like I can't imagine ever putting myself through that again when there's like a
Yeah.
better way to deal with it.
So when you came into my program, you sounded like you were you were going, were you like in and out of ERs and going 10, 20 times a day? How fast was the transition for you? Or like, how fast were you getting over food intolerances? What was that
So
kind of
it's
like for you?
it's interesting. I had been reading about GNM for about a year on and off
Really?
and
Okay.
thinking that completely checks out with my experience in craniosacral therapy. This is not a virus. It's not, oh, we just don't understand the body, but it attacks itself. That's just not what it seems like to me, right? But I
Yeah.
was really struggling with how to integrate it. And I felt like I was just constantly rationalizing it and just in my head, and I couldn't really integrate it into my body. I had
Yeah.
been mostly well because I had been pregnant, and pregnancy was very healing for me. Prior to
That
that, I'd been on the carnivore diet.
pregnancy is very interesting from a lot. The body does some interesting things.
Yeah.
So,
So I had been like healing, and then carnivore diet was very healing for me up until a point when it wasn't. And then I
yeah.
started to have the same experiences. And then also, then it's,
So,
you
so
also have
just so your
psychological
brain knows
issues.
this. So at the first part of the pregnancy, you're sympathetic, you're conflict active in more general. It's like taking steroids
Mm-hmm.
almost. And then
Mm-hmm.
on the second part of pregnancy, you start to become more vagatonic and you go into the rest and digest stage.
It is cool. It was so healing for me. I thought that I was mostly healed from carnivore diet. And then when I became pregnant, I was like, wow, I had all this chronic pain. And I'd been carrying it for so many years that I didn't even know. And having the
Mm-hmm.
complete absence of pain was amazing, right? So I gave birth. I didn't take time off really from work. I took about
Yeah.
2 weeks off. I work from home, so I just worked a little less. My job is very stressful, and I started to
Yeah.
encounter work stress. I also had a very traumatic birth, which was not what I wanted. I wanted a home birth. I ended up in the hospital with a C-section, felt very unheard. I didn't have the chance
Yeah.
to deal with it, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And it made me sick again. I ended up having an abscess, having to go to the ER and have it drained, which is just extremely
Yeah.
traumatic and extremely painful because there's no way to anesthetize you properly. They
Yeah.
give
And
you a
and
shot and cut into you.
yeah. Abscesses are You can know G&M all you want, but like a lot of the times you need a doctor's help with that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it got to the point where I'm nursing, I'm breastfeeding, and you can see my butt cheek is like one size bigger than the other and red and
Wow.
inflamed.
Wow.
So
Wow.
you could, it's to that point where I feel like most GNM practitioners would be like, you got something that's potentially life-threatening. So I went and dealt with it. And in the 48 hours after that, it was like, I can't really afford to continue this because it makes me like, in moments of anguish, I don't enjoy being alive. And I don't say that as like this like suicidal, hysterical, but that is how I feel in that moment. I'm not enjoying literally being alive. I'm just
Hmm.
like questioning my existence on this planet. And as like I have a small baby, I have a lot of responsibility. Like I can't afford to spend like any moment of time in that headspace. And so I was
Yeah.
like, we're just gonna have to take a class and do the thing and really deal with this.
I'm very thankful for all the G&M teachers that I had and everyone who was out teaching G&M. I had to do a lot of my own digging to understand the psyche part, like how our
Mhm.
brain works, how to get somebody over trauma. And one of the things that I just thought was just funny, or sad, or however way you want to look at it, is like when I started to try to just to define what an emotion was, like psychology books definitions were just absolutely ridiculous.
So I enrolled in the course and I had a
Yeah.
couple of really significant light bulb moments.
What was like your aha for me it was seeing the brain CT scans that was like, oh, this makes sense. Like what were some
That
like kind
was
of big aha moments for you?
that was super validating for me because it confirmed what I had suspected the whole time.
I
And
didn't
so
think
it
it
was
was
kind
caused
of
by
like
stress at all.
I was like in your face medical medium and all these other people like you're wrong face. I was right. I should have trusted my intuition. And then that's another that that I feel like that really related back to my whole roommate situation where I'm
Yeah.
not living in alignment with what I perceive to be true. So
Hmm.
that was a big thing. But you talking about how it was like a little bit rough, a little violent almost for me psychologically, talking about how you need to do whatever, like relive the situation that you were in and how you would have resolved it. Previously in my life, I had been in an extremely toxic, unhealthy relationship in my early 20s. And I always wondered, how did I not get sick in that?
Yeah.
And I really do think that, even though that's a terrible thing to think,
Subconscious could have believed it.
it was a cathartic, it was a release
Yeah.
for me. So I
Yeah.
never stored any of that physically.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I was like, I need to just, what would I actually do? Would I scream in this person's face? Would I have yelled at him to get out of my house? And I was just able to just clean it all out. What would you have actually, like, you would have given him a piece of your mind back in 2017. You would have screamed at him to get out. He would have gotten out. You would have stood in the doorway and called all your friends and then dragged his stuff out. And you would have had them sat there for 48 hours so that you didn't have any second guessing and he never
Yeah.
came back in your house. And it's like I just felt this tremendous shift in myself physiologically,
Yeah.
just reliving it in my brain a different way. And I was just like, what a
Just talking
small
about it,
thing.
and if you listen into your body, become more aware about this stuff, and you can feel like almost like your gut muscles because you have these muscles on all your you just
Yeah.
feel, oh,
That's the other
oh, I
thing.
can let that go now.
I started to feel myself, and a traditional doctor will tell you can't feel anything in your internal organs, which is so nuts because we all at
Yeah.
least can feel like a stomach ache or
Yeah.
diarrhea or constipation. But I could
Hmm.
feel my involuntary muscles unclench, which was really wild, a
That's
really
cool.
wild
Yeah.
experience.
So when you started to enroll in the course, was like food an issue for you? Were you finally like able to be like, oh,
Food was
fine, I
an
can have a pizza
issue.
again? Or like, how did that
I
go
had
pan out
started
for
to
you?
eat during pregnancy. I'd started to eat different foods, and after
Yeah.
pregnancy ended, and I enrolled in the course. Like it was like less than 2 months, I think,
Uh-huh.
after pregnancy, when food started to become an issue again. Certain foods started to be off limits, right? Gluten was off limits again,
Yeah.
carbohydrates, everything was causing severe constipation, spasms. I wasn't bleeding profusely yet, but I felt like I was
Totally.
moving in that direction.
Yeah. When were you able to be free with your diet?
I think it took about 2 months after
Hmm.
the course where I was no longer really struggling.
Yeah.
And 6 months after the course, I felt like really confident.
Nice.
It was to the point where I think about 2 months after I was catching things, and my body would still tend to repeat the same patterns. I would catch
Yeah.
it, but it would be, I wouldn't quite understand it until I was already like having what I perceived to be a flare. It would take a few days, and about 6 months after, as something was stressing me out and I was in that moment, I would be like, ah, and I could sort of catch
Yeah.
myself and almost reroute my own physiological response to it, which is pretty remarkable.
So to kind of go into a little bit more detail for the people watching, what I see a lot of people do, and I'm guilty of this too, it's like, oh, girls stressed me out. Just anytime my girlfriend's mad at me, I'm going to get symptoms. I want you to be more specific. It's a moment in time. Maybe it's when she throws a plate across the room. And it's subconscious reminders of when maybe every time you see your girlfriend pulling plates from the cabinet, that's when you get the urge to go to the bathroom because you might not even feel angry or fearful that she's going to throw a plate at you, but your subconscious mind's like, oh my God, a girl has a plate, watch out.
Yep.
You might be stressed out at work and you're in this meeting, this hour-long meeting, and you're like, oh, I hate this meeting. But it's not until 30 minutes in until you start to get symptoms because that's just when you hit that subconscious reminder. Did you have any subconscious reminders where you're like, wow, that's ridiculous or very, it makes sense?
A lot of mine was centered around frustration, like fight or flight, or a situation was so bad, I was trying to get away from it. Me holding in my words, I would get severe ulcers all in my mouth too. I'd have
Wow.
11 to 13 ulcers. I wouldn't be able to speak. My job involves public speaking, so I have to take Tylenol. At one point, I was going to a
Wow.
homeopathic dentist and having them lasered off. It's all very expensive and stressful.
Uh,
And so anytime I would catch myself on my words, it's like I was frustrated with the situation and not saying anything, I would get sick. So there would be little things. I would catch someone say something that I thought might be
mhm.
like irritating and I couldn't clap back, and that would be like my trigger. And it's all not always true either. It's not
Eh,
always that someone is attacking me or whatever. It's like the plate. Someone starts to talk about a
mhm.
particular topic that in the past I had to bite my tongue on, and I would get sick around
Yeah.
that.
It might seem insensitive that I'm like laughing, but it's just funny how like how the
Totally.
subconscious sees things because your words are your weapons, but it's also this double-edged sword. And we just because this is like the only way we know the mind works because it's just we're just I think we're just so limited in this, but just our society as a whole, people think like they have to be like Buddha and never experience a negative emotion. You literally just need to see the subconscious. When was the one time you had to hold your tongue and somebody
Yep.
that what was you just need to remember that shocking moment and somehow you're being subconscious reminded of it. You can still be angry and not get ulcers. You just have to see the subconscious connection.
Yes. Yes. And I was able,
Yeah.
it's so trippy. I could read about GNM, I can understand what I'm reading, but until I could really connect with it emotionally and
Yeah.
physiologically, I was not making progress. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden I was connecting my current experiences, with the past experience that, set the whole thing off. And now it's so
Hmm.
easy. Now it's so easy when I have one of those experiences. It's just, it's happening again. It's okay. You can be mad. You could say the thing. I could say the thing that I'm thinking about holding back. I don't have to have an explosive, violent reaction,
Hmm.
but I could actually just like express myself and not constantly bite my tongue, which was,
Yeah.
that was a whole nother thing I did all the time is I would bite my tongue.
Look at the words you're using.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of
So,
I just finished a conference where I said my job is to eat shit and move things forward. It's crazy how it is really ingrained in our language.
and it's not just English, it's all of them, believe it or not. How were your symptoms like getting in the way of family time?
It's hard to nurse a baby when you have to go to the bathroom 10 plus times a day, or if you're
Yeah.
in the bathroom. And this is something that maybe most people don't experience, but it's like constipated spasms. So it feels like you have to go to the bathroom. So you're at the toilet, but you're not. And instead, it's mixed up with the sensation of being kicked in the tailbone. And that's a very imprecise way of saying it because it's not your literal tailbone, it's your colon. but the pressure is so intense that you feel like you're being stomp kicked, maybe in the tailbone.
This is something I didn't experience, so I have a very hard time relating it to people. One of the books and lab studies that I read, they did a great job of explaining constipation because so what's actually happening is the muscles at the rectum are clamped shut.
Yes,
Like they're like this. And if I did this with my hand for 5 minutes, what would
it
who knows what would go
hurts.
wrong? It would
It
hurt.
hurts. It hurts.
And the rest of the colon is open to hold this thing we're fearful of losing. And if that gets resolved, or if we hit a PTSD trigger, the muscles will cramp, and that hurts, especially if you got an
Yes.
ulcer there and you got an abscess. It just be, and then it gets out of control really fast when you don't have the tools to address it.
I'd be in a cold sweat, just like sweat pouring down, trying to go back and forth from the toilet to the bathtub because the pain was so intense. And then you start tearing rectal tissue because your body is spasming so hard. It was completely insane. The worst spasm day I ever had was 10 hours long.
Wow,
Completely.
that's
I was
that's wild.
I was taking anything and everything I could to try to kill the spasms.
Do you
To my
know
credit,
do you
I
know what
never got
was
addicted to
causing?
opioids.
Wow. Do you know what would
I
cause
don't
that big or
I don't know what caused that big one. I had a 10-hour one and then I had a 6-hour one. It's like in early 2022. It was physically exhausting. It was like being in labor. I have not had anything like that since the class.
yeah, it's the way that we're taught about disease. It's just like this thing that we catch and we're stuck with it, and you either can get rid of it or you can't. But GNM teaches us is that it's our body responding to a conflict shock and trying to
Yeah.
help us survive it. And essentially what our job and it catches us by surprise. It's not like something it's unexpected. That's part of it. We're just more sensitive to it because we have this scarred past. This is what I tell people is like you just live your life, and when you get symptoms we do this detective CSI work of
Yes.
trying to I find it a fun process because but you really learn a lot about yourself. This is stuff that your conscious mind I can't deal with it. Give it to your butt, give it to your colon.
Yep. My body is just trying to process it on my behalf. And that is something that I have always, I think, struggled with it. I don't process emotion very well. I'm very type A, boardroom, executive vibe. I'm in a male dominated atmosphere too, which is fine with me, but I don't think that it's necessarily like conducive to me processing girl
Yeah.
emotions, experiencing them, right, to some degree, and like
Yeah.
even just feeling them. There's no
Mm-hmm.
time in my life to feel them. And so I have to be more, I feel like, present with myself as a human being.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just the way our subconscious experiences things. And as part is like human evolution is where we are technologically, like our biology having computer screens and all that information thrown at us. When was that ever a thing in the history
yeah.
of human? It has to adapt to these things or
Yeah. There's a
so
lot to process all the time.
yeah. Were you finding like the being on the strict diet, like interfering with work meetings and taking clients out to lunch or anything? Or
I think that being on a strict diet created a whole new set of conflicts because then I began to live this life of denying myself and being sad, impoverished Angela, who's always got to show lots of restraint and be constantly denying herself. And it's like a
mm-hmm.
food martyr. And I don't think that was healthy either because a lot of my conflicts are around me denying myself this, using too much restraint, not speaking my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so the strict diet just played into that role.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was good for me. It provided me immediate relief in the beginning, like taking a painkiller or Tylenol, but
Yeah.
it did not last. It did not last.
I don't know how you if you relate to this at all, but sometimes I'll just be like eating like pizza and I'll be like,
Hmm.
man, like 4 or 5 years, however long it's been, I would have been driving to a farm and calling anybody who eats pizza crazy. I had so much brain power going towards weird food stuff. I like could not focus on my career at all. Cause literally
Yeah.
50% of the thoughts in my head we're going towards food and other wacko holistic
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
instead of my job.
Completely wrapped up in food. Food just like took over my life. Avoid, 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 avoid this, avoid that, avoid this, avoid that. Yeah, I would eat nothing but like half raw, rarer than rare hamburger patties. I would be traveling. There's this hysterical video of me ironing a burger patty in a hotel room to warm it up.
You're making me sick right now.
Is hysterical. But oh my gosh, Angela, that's the way you live your life because you're so afraid of seed oils that you can't get a burger downstairs in the hotel restaurant. I don't sit at home and guzzle seed oils. I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
eat something a little bit different, but hysterical over, I'm just going to go to a restaurant and just eat something on the menu now. It's like, geez,
And,
ironing a burger.
that is next level. I haven't heard that before. I remember I had a friend confront me one day and he goes, Mike, you've been doing all this crazy diet stuff for 2 years. And dude, like you're still super skinny. I don't think this is working. And I physically couldn't hear it because I was just so
Right,
invested.
right.
You guys see it on my TikTok and Instagram and stuff. Like I had pizza. I had leftover pizza this morning.
Yep.
I know how to do Weston A. Price and all that stuff, but like I don't need to do it.
I try to eat close to Weston A. Price, especially when I'm pregnant. I want to have another baby soon, trying to get back into that mode. But
That's really cool. Yeah.
but I chaired a 16-hour board meeting with 1,200 people, or a convention, basically a national political convention, over
Yeah.
the weekend. Started at 9 a.m., finished at 1 a.m. I was eating cold pizza at the podium
Yeah.
because what am I going to do? Like, hey,
Yeah.
everybody, we're going to pause our insane meeting so that I can go eat
The deer and
rare,
grill it
yeah,
up.
rare steak that's untouched by anything else in my hotel room. And like,
Yeah.
no, it's just, you're just gonna power through the day and you eat what's there. And it was fuel,
Yeah.
and I got fueled and I finished my crazy thing.
Yeah.
Very necessary to be able to eat like that occasionally. It is very necessary for me.
If you do any sort of traveling, it sounds like you have to travel a lot. Like what,
A
you're gonna know
lot.
where all the Whole Foods are and get a taxi to Whole Foods and
Well, I would
you're
Instacart
lucky
raw
if there is
meat.
a whole,
Yeah.
oh my God.
I would Instacart raw meat to my hotel room and I would heat it a little bit in the coffee maker or with an
Oh
iron
my
or
God.
not. Or I would just be eating like a big chunk of raw salmon, which is very hard to cut through the skin if you don't have a knife, which you don't because you're traveling and TSA doesn't let you take that in your
You
carry-on.
gotta
So
use your plastic knife.
it was sad, I'm like fighting this piece of raw salmon skin. It's just like, oh, Angela, this is not a way to live.
And for those of you who like still aren't buying this is making me a little sick to my stomach. And it's just all she's saying is words.
Yeah.
And it's
I mean,
making me sick to my stomach.
I didn't think I was gonna live. Like I was like, here I am alive, but it
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't feel like with the weight of this physically and psychologically, I just don't feel
Yeah.
like I'm gonna make it like another 10 years. I don't know how long I'll be alive. Very grim. I didn't feel suicidal, but it just felt so grim. And
Yeah.
there was no joy in life and everything was pain. Looking back on it, it seemed like absurdly dramatic, but in the moment, when day in, day out, you deal with
Yeah.
severe chronic pain, an embarrassing, debilitating disease, it's like there's no hope, there's nothing good to look forward to.
And if you just don't know how this thing works, how you get anxious about the anxious feelings that you have.
Yes. Yeah. It's just
And
a doom
it's
spiral.
obnoxious. Yeah. And it's no, you're supposed to feel that anxiety, so you're motivated to fix the problem. And I
Yes.
know that sounds insensitive, but it's no, like here's a solution. You need to fix the problem that's making you anxious. And
Totally.
a lot of people, were told that, oh, it's Crohn's and colitis, it's unfixable.
It's just totally wrong. I was like 96 pounds, 5'7".
Wow.
This is like a double zero. I was wearing a double zero pants and they were loose. And
Wow.
now I'm like a size 4, normal, like
Wow.
thin, but normal body type. I eat
Wow.
almost whatever I want. I can tell if I'm in like a moment of stress, I should let my body, I think about it as letting my body rest, not denying myself food. I'm like, whatever that crazy junk food you want to eat, we're going to rest today and we're going to have it tomorrow. And then
Yeah.
it's just completely changed my paradigm.
Yeah.
So I
Double
went like
zero. I'm a
to
guy, so we
0
don't know what that means.
to 1. I mean, it's the size of basically what a skinny 12-year-old girl would wear,
Wow.
like very skinny.
Yeah. And that like when you have like a leadership job, it's very, we're subconscious beings and we're more likely to follow a healthy person and take them
Yes.
seriously than a sick person. They're like, what?
It
Why the hell
was
should I listen to
hard,
you?
right? I have to work harder to project that vibe, that feeling.
Yeah.
So now I don't have to work as hard at that. And it's difficult to
It's totally
articulate.
subconscious. It's subconscious. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's I had to bang my fist a little bit more the thinner
Hmm.
I was, and now I can be more relaxed and not have to try so hard.
What did you find most helpful about the program?
I think the class was the most helpful for me, and
When you say
hearing another
class,
person,
what do you
your
mean?
video class, the videos
Oh, just
that
the
you did,
videos? Okay, the ones
the
where I'm
videos were
just
the most
talking.
helpful for me,
Okay.
and hearing another human being talk about it in more relatable terms. G&M classes that you could take, there, and none of this stuff is easy to find.
Hmm.
There's books, there's chat groups, but it's very rigid. And I don't want to say that it's wrong, but it can be difficult to relate to and to help you process. So you
Yeah.
bridged like theory to human experience. And that is something that I find in the G&M community that they're not as good at doing that. They still have a little bit of ways to go. It can be very, like it's German, right? It can be very
Yeah.
insensitive, a little too cerebral. It's, you have to literally feel this in your body. The course was just, it was able to do that. Talking
Thank
about
you.
understanding what emotions are, that was a big thing too.
That
Um,
was a huge revelation for me. I was like, because
yeah,
I was putting this course together and I'm like, wait a second, I don't know what emotion is. Of course, nothing makes sense.
I feel like a lot of us probably struggle with this frustration of what am I doing wrong? And there's like a lot of blame because after
Hmm.
you've done a ton of supplements, you've done this protocol, you've done that protocol, you start to be like, it's me, like, what am I doing wrong? Instead
Yeah.
of, kind of reframing that to how do I fix this? Like, blaming
Yeah.
yourself and eating yourself alive is not particularly helpful either. So you were able to make that human connection without it
Thank
being
you.
full of judgment.
Again, I love everybody who teaches and preaches GNM and the scientific chart that we have now. I think that was quite a battle to consolidate it. I think Dr. Hammer would
Yeah.
just write these huge books.
Yep.
Like he wrote like these huge books about breast cancer, and then like you go read about breast cancer on the website, and it's 3 pages long. But it would had
Yes.
to have been extracted from like a whole book. And then again, it's from a German community, and Germans, it's just in their culture to be that way for good reason. But one of my goals was I want to help people get better as fast as possible with the least amount of thinking. And I'm as gung ho as they get. And I remember, and I had really good help. I'm really thankful to the people who were teaching me. But I put 100% full steam ahead, and it is 6 months to a year. And I'm like, nobody has time
Yep.
for that. I know you cringe when I say PTSD triggers everybody the G, but I still don't understand the track analogy.
It's just, it's helpful to, what you're talking about, but you communicate it in relatable terms. That is really important. And so you've done a good
Mm-hmm.
job of not alienating the people that you're speaking to by beating us over the head. Don't use that word. Don't use that word. We know what you're saying. But for 5, 7,
Yeah.
some of us like 10 years, we've been talking about it in these terms. And it takes
Yeah.
a little bit of work to shift your paradigm.
I think those of us with gut issues are maybe a little lucky because we our primary focus can be on those PTSD triggers
Yeah.
versus maybe some other conditions where maybe we need to be a little bit more picky and stuff.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
no, that's yeah, that's a big that I hear that from a lot of people. They're just like it's just too much to learn. It's a big leap because there's not many. Oh, it's like this. Nope. Oh, it's like that. Nope. No. Yeah. It's a these are new patterns your brain hasn't seen before.
It's really worth it. It's
Thank you.
really worth it to just do it. I think that we sometimes we procrastinate. I know I procrastinated doing certain things that I thought would be good for me because I didn't, on some subconscious level, I didn't want to deal with it. And
Yeah.
I think that it's very good to just deal with it and don't let being ill become a part of your identity. It's not. And
Mhm.
just much, there's just so much more room in your life for other aspects of your identity once you just cut chronic illness out.
It's out there. If you believe in manifestation and all that stuff, most people can't see it because they can't even say the words.
Yep.
I wish doctors would say we haven't found a cure yet, instead
Yet.
of saying there's no cure. And even that statement is obnoxious. So, because people get better all the time, it just hasn't been investigated. There's tons of books from the 50s,
Yeah.
not from just from Dr. Hammer, from the 50s and like they had it all. Oh, yeah, we sent this. The people who got better, they just weren't angry about their girlfriend breaking up with them 5 years later.
And be open to healing. Let yourself be open to it. Don't deny yourself that possibility. Because it's a very real possibility. Whatever your doctor has said, that can start its own track, right? Believing their fatalism, like just be open to healing. It's very possible.
Yeah, us humans have figured out how to send something that weighs thousands of pounds through the air. And we can't figure this out. It's obnoxious. Like we have the internet and phones, like a computer used to be the size of buildings. Now they fit in our pocket and they're faster than that. Come on, not buying it.
100%.
So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I'm so glad that you're able to do what you're passionate about again.
You are welcome.
Thank you.